Hi everybody, we are making plum pudding today. I have my trusty recipe card that I have developed based on my grandmother's fruitcake recipe and the Watkins plum pudding recipe from 1938 in the Watkins cookbook. And I need my glasses. So all of the things that I need are all laid out. This is my bowl of drunken fruit that has been percolating for a couple of days. And it's all dried fruit that I get at the local grocery store. I do make my own candied peel because Pierre is a citrus lover and will eat his weight in oranges and citrus fruit in the winter. So we save the peeling and I make candied peel. That way I know it doesn't have any food coloring in it. The other fruit in here are cherries that I brandied back during cherry season, apricots, raisins, and cranberries. And the alcohol of choice this year was brandy and Jameson's and a bit of Sauterelles Prestige. And it doesn't really matter if you mix your alcohols, because the point is to get the fruit drunk. And the best way to get the fruit drunk is to use up whatever is left over in your china cupboard that you like to drink. I wouldn't put anything in here that I wouldn't drink in a glass. So none of that horrible alcohol that is best sent down the drain. All stuff that you would like to drink. So there's my fruit. The next step is to mix my dry ingredients. So now I'm ready to mix my dry ingredients. I need a cup of flour. I need a half a cup of cocoa-ish, because, you know, chocolate.
Almost lost the chocolate.
Almost lost the chocolate all over my cupboards. Which would put the kibosh to making plum pudding this morning, because I'm almost out of cocoa. I'm like that much cocoa left, which would amount to like 3/4 of a cup, so I'm just going to dump it all in. Because, you know, chocolate. And this is a really forgiving recipe. So all of these things can be ish. Cinnamon. Now cinnamon, I don't like to use too much cinnamon because I don't want an overwhelming flavor of cinnamon, but about a rounding 1/4 teaspoon. A 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And I normally measure that in my hand. And a teaspoon of baking powder, and I have some brand new baking powder. My old baking powder is getting elderly. There's not much left in the bottom of the container, but I noticed that the other day that it wasn't raising nicely, so I'm going to turf it and start over again. So I need a teaspoon of baking powder. So in here, flour, 1/2 cup-ish of cocoa, 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a teaspoon of baking powder. I'm going to mix that all together. So that's all nicely mixed together. And it goes into the drunk fruit. Drunk fruit and chocolate. And I do this step first so that the drunk fruit gets covered in flour and cocoa. And it helps to keep the fruit suspended in the cake instead of falling down into the bottom of the tins. And that's already looking pretty cake-like. Okay. So now the wet ingredients. I need 2 eggs.
2 eggs coming up.
And I always crack them into another receptacle before putting them into my bowl, because sometimes I use farm fresh eggs and there might be bits in the egg that I don't want. Today's were grocery store eggs, so we're usually good. Okay, 1/2 cup of coffee. makes the chocolate better. 1/3 cup of molasses. And that's an ish, because, you know, molasses is good too. Just butter of vanilla. Those together. Butter. Yep. And I have a brick of cold butter from the fridge. And we need 1/2 cup. And it's marked on the outside of the butter. And our butter in Canada is salted. We can get unsalted butter, but you have to look for it. It's usually in the freezer section. Most of our butter is salted though. And I'm just gonna cut it into... Now, in the 19th century, and my grandmother would have used lard, but I like my plum puddings to be enjoyed by people who don't eat meat and don't eat pork. So I use butter. And it doesn't really matter the size that you're breaking this up into. It's all going to be melty in the pudding eventually. And now I'm going to wash my hands for just a second. Mix that butter into that's pretty dispersed. And now I'm going to add my eggs and molasses and the liquid ingredients. So that's the kind of consistency you're looking for. I have pudding tins. They come with lids. But I've also been known to use a Pyrex bowl as well. And I'm wondering how many pudding tins I will need. So now I'm going to grease my pudding tins. Pudding tins are a 19th century thing. Before the 19th century, in the 17th and 18th century, you could dampen a linen towel and then coat the towel in flour and put your pudding in that to steam, and that's perfectly acceptable too. If you didn't want to get your hands greasy, you could also spray these, especially these fluted ones. They're full of nooks and crannies. But I find the spray tends to taste a little chemically, so I try not to use it. If you were looking to make a vegan cake, you could also use a hard margarine. Again, I find it tastes a little chemically. I'm going to grease the bowl in case I need to have a fourth receptacle. But looks like I'll have enough for 3. I'm going to wash my hands again. Okay, and because I don't want to lift this heavy bowl, I'm going to use a ladle. I'm using a rubber spatula to get out all of that chocolatey goodness. Because why put all of that chocolatey goodness down the drain? Now, the lids on these, pretty straightforward. They just twist until you find the groove to set the lid on. There we go, 2. This one's a bit old-fashioned. It has side clamps. And if I had filled this one, I would take a tea saucer, put it on top, cover the whole thing with a piece of wax paper, and put a giant rubber band on. But since I didn't need this one, it'll get washed. So these 3 puddings now will go into these 3 puddings will now go into a water bath in the oven at 350 Fahrenheit for 3 hours, and later on we'll have pudding. I'm going to make a lot of noise now, and Kara will probably want to cut this out as I set up the water bath, and we'll do one last picture of the water bath in the oven, and I'll show you how to do that. So my oven the rack is set in the middle of the oven. This pan is what I use for the water bath. It was a broiler pan from an oven in the 60s. I didn't like the broiler part because it was my job to clean it all the time, so it disappeared in a move. But I kept the bottom because it's perfect for steaming puddings. So the pan is in, the puddings will go in. Okay. Then my kettle, fill up the water bath, because who has the strength to carry a water bath with puddings in it all the way from the sink to the stove? But also I will be checking from time to time to make sure that there's still water in the water bath, and I'll use the kettle at that point. And my oven is not hot at this point. And now I'm going to turn it on. And I will refill the kettle, set my timer for an hour, do the dishes, and come back and check and see how they're doing in an hour. So my timer has gone off for a second time. I did add some water earlier, but I figured we'd show you what it looks like. Oh my god, it smells good in this kitchen. I'm doing this very carefully so that I don't spill boiling water all over my hand. If my pudding pots were ceramic, I would make sure that my kettle was also boiling before I put water in here. Even the Pyrex one, I've been known to crack Pyrex in the oven. So that'll go on for 1 more hour. And like I said, it already smells really good in this house. Yummy.
Looks good, honey.